Hello, everyone. My name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
And we have today our guest, Gareth Lock.
How you doing?
Welcome to the studio.
High five. Boom.
And we invited Gareth for a couple of reasons. By the way, this video, we're not reacting to anything. We're just talking about the incident that we had a couple months ago in December where Dan was involved. And the main reason why we're recording this video is because a lot of people keep asking, where's part 2? You guys were going to meet with Dan and all this, that they have all these questions. So we haven't met with Dan. Let's just answer that. We have offered to come to North Carolina to their headquarters, and they still haven't provided access to all the scripts.
Well,
they're working on that.
It's not that they haven't provided. They're getting some of the transcripts
because
from
they use third parties.
They used an outsourced transportation company. They've been very good about. No problem. I just want to say that up front. Really, they have. They've been great about that.
Right. But it's not, I just don't want people to feel like it's not going to happen or that we have chosen not to meet with them or whatever. No, it's just we haven't been able to make it happen. But there are questions out there. All right. The first question is questioning how are 3 people, and not just us because we're idiots, but Brian Kakuk, who ran chambers for the U.S. Navy. How can 3 qualified divers how did we not spot that this was a very bad DCS incident and drove you straight to the hospital from the dive site? Why didn't we do that? That's number 1.
Okay. Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah.
Listen. Let me tell you.
Hear your perspective.
Let me tell you my perspective as the idiot diver. Listen.
So I correct you right away. You're not an idiot diver, and that's the key thing.
I know, that's a good point. I'm just joking about myself. So listen. This is really, really important. When you do a dive and you follow your dive computer and then go beyond and actually surface at a gradient factor even more conservative than my gradient factor high of 70, and I'm not here to get too technical. There's plenty of other videos on, is that a conservative setting? It's a conservative setting. And then you come up to the surface and you feel different. It's not that you have this, DCS is so identifiable, you are bent. It's not like that. It's more like they don't even really know what's going on. I come up to the surface, and I'm definitely tired.
You're exhausted, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the first thing. And then which was confusing, I'm not able to catch my breath. And mind you, I had just been doing a 40-minute deco stop at like 20 feet and then more at 10 feet. So there was I'm not exerted.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I'm like, what's going on? And then I grab the oxygen, but I'm so tired, just tired at this point. Breathe in the oxygen that in my mind, I don't really know what's going on. I'm not saying, and this isn't a matter of criticism. This is a matter of my perspective, so you can hear what it's like. I want everybody out there to know what it may be like if this happens to you. You're not confused like, is that Gus? Is that Brian? You're not like that. You're just more confused about,
why am I tired?
What's going on with me? Why am I tired? And why am I sort of gasping for air? And now I start to think at that moment, I'm going to tell you what really came to my mind.
Yeah.
What do you think came to my mind when I was gasping for air and trying to get the oxygen? And it wasn't that I was bent. It was something else that I thought happened.
Well,
I thought
I
had a CO2 breakthrough.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I thought was interesting from these experts on the internet after our video came out was that how can you guys not immediately identify that he's bent after he's tired? After not being exerted, he's tired. That's clearly being bent. The funny thing is, when you look at the symptoms for, name it, hyperoxia, hypoxia, hypercapnia, CO2 breakthrough, whatever, like anything, it's all almost the same.
It's right
Confused,
there.
tired, cannot catch your breath. Like bad gas, which we also are concerned when we go to, countries like Mexico and, Mike had a really bad incident in Mexico with bad gas. Abaco in the Bahamas. This is not, first world country state of the art filling stations, Sometimes I'm worried about, do I have, good air, like in the tank, right? Did he have bad air? Like,
or did I overbreathe the rebreather?
All of these things have the same. And I invite you to go to Google and search hypercapnia, hyperoxia, and look at the symptoms, and they're almost all identical. You cannot tell. And maybe, Gareth, you can talk about specifically how people's perception changes after you know what happened. Like, after you know the facts, how does that kind of change your perception, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to fill the gaps in with what's going on. And so there's a number of different perspectives. And it's, I got asked, have I, why haven't I commented on the video? And I, chatting to the guys before, one of the reasons I haven't is because there are multiple perspectives. There's Woody's, there's Gus's, there's Brian's, there's all of the stakeholders involved have got their own story about how it makes sense. And those stories are not like a stills camera or a video camera that captures the stuff there and then. We make sense of the stuff at that time based on our previous experiences. People not being bent before. And I've got a story that, that I tell in conferences about an event that happened to me. And I got some visual disturbances. I was diagnosed with having a PFO. But I wasn't clear of mind about what's going on. So the expectation that you've got clear thought in the here and the now, when stuff isn't quite right, is massively flawed. And we can easily recreate that with our knowledge. We can join the dots looking backwards. Right. And how our memory is malleable based on the stories that are there as well. So even, Woody's account now is different to the account that would have happened at that time because of the way that we will recount a story, we will then re-encode it as we're telling that story, restoring it, and it will get corrupted. And then when we retrieve that memory, it gets corrupted again. So the whole piece about... I'm going to say eyewitness testimonies, which is what we're talking about here. They are all massively flawed, and yet they're held as a standard even in the legal space, and yet they've shown to be hugely flawed. So what people recall at the time, what they recall now, are always going to be different, and that doesn't mean they're lying. It doesn't mean they've changed the story, not intentionally anyway. It just means that the stories, and we can seed memories. The film Inception. That's a real thing where you can just sow a seed and not even in that sense it was intentional, but people can sow seeds and it changes people's thoughts.
You know what's funny though? In that moment, and maybe I did this wrong, all right? In that moment, I wasn't so concerned about, is he hypercapnia? Is it hyperoxia? I wasn't thinking about whether you were bent or anything. I was just about, he can't catch his breath and he's in the water. I need to get him out of the water. That was my only mission. Like I'm not going to play doctor right here and try to diagnose him while he's exhausted with, waist deep water. I need to get him out of here. Let me take his fins. Let me grab his gear. Let me help him out of here, right? That was number one. Once you sat down, we took your gear. Okay, now we have more time to analyze because I knew that if you pass out sitting on a bench, you're not going to drown, right? So maybe I did that wrong. I don't know. But people are saying you should immediately know that was Woody being bent. Of course, it's easy to say that when you know what
the outcomes are, because you can join the dots.
Right. So that was number one. I think the biggest challenge is, and this connects to number two, is why didn't you just drive straight to the hospital? Is that once you caught your breath, which eventually you did, and you got in the van, you became back to being you. Like up to that point, you were not talkative, which is not like you. Anyone who knows you. And people are like, is Woody putting a front for dive talk? No. This is him 24/7. All right. So once you were in the van, which is, by the way, when you dive in Abaco in these caves, I don't know, Gareth, if you've been there, but it's like an hour away from civilization. You're in the jungle, right? So once you're on the drive on the way back, Woody became back himself. I'm fine. I don't need anything. I'm good to go. Are you sure, bro? Like, let's go to the hospital. And I think after talking about going to the hospital, we switched to let's skip dinner. Let's just go home. You can lay down. And I think Brian even suggested, like, hey, can you, or suggested to you, can you leave your door open so Gus is checking on you every couple hours or whatever? Like, our course of action changed based on how you were recovering in the van. And that's one thing we learned. It seems like with DCS, you go through waves. You go through, I'm bent, I'm normal. I'm bent, I'm normal. It's like a roller coaster.
So just on that, I would just say is one of the, there's a sample size of 1 here. And you're making stories, making sense of the situation based on that sample size of 1. And the problem with DCS is the huge variability that's in it. So in this case, yes, there may be the waves, but other people, absolutely not. And that,
Good
because
point.
of the variability that we have in people, that's one of the problems we've got is it or isn't it? And the huge denial that's going on, and the because people don't get exposed to it, and yet we talk about it, and yet the denial is a huge thing. So just be very careful about the say this is what happens. No, this is what happens in this case.
Right.
And in other cases, it may be very different. And so people can have, skin rash, they feel fine, and they don't recognize it, and they feel fine, but they've got skin rash, and they're not tired. And so the interperson variability is huge.
I want to comment on something you just said. We talked about it before we came on here. I want to talk about this denial concept, okay? Because I think it's misunderstood as well.
Or it's variable.
So listen to my thinking. You can say that somebody may be saying they're in denial because they're worried about their pride or they're worried about their ego. Or you can say they're in denial because they're just absolutely, truly not aware of what's going on, and they just aren't jumping to the conclusion that they're bent. I want to address those that are even thinking or have commented that you were in denial because you just didn't want to admit that you could get bent. I don't have that thinking capacity. Don't overthink me. I'm not even good enough to think that way. I literally was just like, I don't know.
I'm fine. Yeah.
And then I'm fine. And when they asked me the question in the van, like, I'm being honest with them. I have no reason to tell them, don't take me anywhere because I'm too good for that. I was just like, no, guys, I'm really fine. And by the way, I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm starting to feel, so it's denial based upon your feeling of how you are in that moment. It's not denial for the sake of, I'm not capable of being bent. I'm better than that. That's never, ever went through my head. It just...
So the reason why I'm smiling is because I've been on the other side of it, of the denial of, in a trip in Malta, of surfacing and having visual disturbances. And it's like, oh, that's a bit odd. And then the boat sort of came back in and the visual disturbances stopped. I didn't have any of the signs, symptoms of DCS. And it was like, okay, fine. And we then offloaded the gear off the boat. And we were about 30, 40 minutes after surfacing. So peak bubbling time after this dive. And it was a 65-meter, 30-minute bottom time. And as I was lifting the twin set off the boat and then into the flatbed truck, I got a whole bunch of visual disturbances, like aura from like migraine. And I've never had migraine before. And I remember thinking to myself, that's cool, I've got a PFO. But then I didn't say anything to anybody. And for the next hour and a half or so, I had visual disturbances, and then they sort of they died away and everything was okay.
So it was like in waves.
Yeah, well, it was just because of the way that it's not so much the waves, that was the, from what I can gather afterwards, that's one of the issues. But I didn't say anything to anybody. And one of the reasons is because I was flying home the following day. I was there with my girlfriend. Wow. And we flew home the following day. And the way I normally tell the story in a conference or whatever is I tell it in the third person. So I tell the story. There's a photographer. They've been diving there for the week, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't miss any deco. They followed the stuff through. And they didn't say anything. Everything was fine. They flew back to the UK the following day. What do you think about that diver? And you get a whole bunch of expletives, real negative behaviors. And then I go, that was me. And everybody then just looks at their feet and is like, really embarrassed.
Yeah.
And it's just understanding that in that case, there was a denial about not saying anything, because I knew that if I said something at that stage, I'd probably end up going into a chamber, which meant that I wasn't going to be flying home the following day, which means we weren't going to be going home, and it was going to wreck things. And after the hour and a half, when the visual disturbances stopped, it's like, cool, must be okay.
Yeah.
So I got back to the UK. I spoke to my tech instructor and said, I think I've got a PFO. What's the name of the dock in the UK that's down our way? So I spoke to him, and he said, look, it sounds like it, but the only way we're going to get it confirmed is to go and do a bubble test. So I did a transthoracic echocardiogram.
Me too.
And I had an 8 mil by 12 mil hole, which So I've got an Amplatzer device. It's been fixed. But it's that piece of, again, that's the variability of the denial that happens. Of sometimes actually it's, I don't even know what this is. So it's not an active denial. Then there's the bit of, it can't be me because I followed all the protocols and everything. You know, I don't bubble, I don't bend. I've got a denial because I know there's a consequence if I speak up. So again, we've got this huge variability that's there.
You know what's funny is after all the experts in scuba board chimed in, there were some people that reached out and said, I'm a doctor and I got bent and I didn't tell anybody. I came out, my right arm was numb. And I'm like, maybe I slept wrong. Like, I don't know. I wonder. Maybe, Gary, you know this. But, like, I wonder if, like, the more you know, the more in denial you are. You know? Like I said, this guy was a doctor and a diver. And he's like, I don't know. Maybe not.
Doctors
maybe I'm not
are some
bad.
of the worst patients that are out there anyway. And you can tell them that.
Well, as you're talking, I'm really trying to hone in on what I was thinking. And you just said something else that made me remember something else. Okay?
Stories beget
Number
stories.
one, I didn't have a PFO. I think I posted my whole PFO test on
Dive Talk Plus, yeah.
Dive Talk Plus. You could go look at it. But what I do remember, to your point, okay, and I didn't say this on the first videos, but this is the truth. I do remember thinking in the van, I know this is silly, but it's really worth your point. I want to feel better, and the fact that I do, I'm now not going to spoil this steak dinner that we all planned. I really cared about that. I know it's crazy. Just that moment, I was like, I don't want to be the reason to ruin this. I'm not going to ruin this. I'm fine now. I really did think that on the van. I remember thinking, I'm not. No, guys, I don't need to go home. Let's finish our plan. We had a great dive and we planned a great dinner, and I didn't want to ruin it, and I didn't think I needed to ruin it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about people not wanting to ruin dives for others because they've got a bit of kit that's broken, they don't feel quite right, they've got a blocked nose, so there's a whole bunch of social reasons why we want to help others. And again, diving is a social activity, so that it's something that's often missed is the social aspect and the social pressures that are there of exactly what you've described and I did as well.
The other challenge is, and this is also part of the criticism, is how can you guys go and make steaks knowing that he's bent? All right, let's talk about how can we go and make steaks part with the knowing that he's bent. We'll talk about that later. But the first one is that we're asking you constantly, how are you feeling? Are you fine? And I'm thinking in my head, because at that point we didn't know he was bent. I'm thinking in my head, well, he's been breathing O2 for an hour. He's telling me he's back to normal. He's asking we ask you, like, how do you want your steak? And when you said your horrific preference on the steak level of cooking, I knew you were back to normal.
Extra well done.
It's terrible. But it's leather. But anyway, the point is I knew that you were back to normal. But we keep asking you, whether we should go to the hospital, all this stuff. You keep saying no. And people are like, it doesn't matter. You should have taken him anyway. So should we just, like, at gunpoint take now patients to the chamber? Like, no, you're going. Knife to the throat, let's go.
And I would call that, actually, and say, not as severe as that, but the victim, casualty, is the worst decision maker in any situation like this. So I think the simple answer is yes. Because at that stage, and I get that in the States, it's probably a very different approach to how I would take it from a European, UK approach, is, I'm sorry, you're not making these decisions anymore. You are no longer part of this. It's not fair. Tough. We're now looking after you. What's the worst that can happen? We take you there and they go, everything's okay. And so from that point, Gus, I think, it's easy in hindsight to do that. But that's what this story's about. It's about telling people to say, you know what, if you're in that situation, you turn around and say, no, that is not your decision, because there's a whole body of evidence out here that says, you know what, those people who are casualties suck when it comes to making decisions.
Yeah, that's a lesson that I learned from this one. The second one was how do you guys not know that he was bent? Like, you're such an expert. The funny part is, after you passed out, all right, and we took you to the hospital, fainted, throwing up, all of these symptoms, Dan, who are the global experts on bent, they still said, we're not convinced.
Their internal transcripts, which we haven't shared yet, we got transcripts of them talking internally, and they said, this is not clear whether or not he's bent. Now,
but they expected
I'm not.
But that's not the same as saying not bent.
But I have taken care of people that have been bent, and they had neurological effects, and they couldn't even remember my name, and they wanted to be in charge. I'm not going to say who.
Right.
And I absolutely refused and took them. But my case was not as severe as that at that time.
You were normal.
I was back to normal in my mind, but you cannot listen to the victim. You can't. I'm telling you that right now. Yeah. The casualty. You cannot listen to me, because all of the factors that we just discussed are at play in the person that is ill's mind, and they don't mean to. They're not trying to be in denial.
Right.
They can't help it. I'm telling you from a fact, they simply are not in the same level as reality as your perspective from the outside. They're not. And one other very important thing. Brian said, by the way, the dinner will have Texas toast.
That's okay.
I'm just saying.
Why are you okay? Why are you
if there
the way
was
that
Texas
you are?
toast with the well done steak, I'm not.
That's
terrible. Hard to.
All right.
Well, from the ignorant Brit, it doesn't matter.
No, but I'm saying, and I want people watching this video to comment below. Think about your dive buddy. If your dive buddy said to you, and they're acting normal, all right? We're not talking about they don't even remember your name. They're talking normal. They said, I'm fine. I don't need to go. Do not take me there. I am fine. And they sound and look fine, because we're just riding on a van.
Bear in mind, you've just consumed a bunch of oxygen, though, haven't you?
Sure. Yes. But if you and your dive buddy says that to you, do you still force him to go without knowing? Because now, knowing what I know, I would have taken you. I would have said, shut up, you're going. Right? Because now we know what happened. But at that time, will you still force your dive buddy to go no matter what? If they're acting normal, talking normal, and they're telling you, I don't know what that was, but it's gone.
So I'd ask the question, Gus, why not?
No, now knowing what I know.
No, but even without the not knowing why wouldn't you take somebody? So I'm just going to say, is there a concern about, insurance, about medical, about the stigma? No. So I would ask the question of, if you're in that situation, rather than say, are you going to force your buddy to go?
Yeah.
Turn it around the other way. Why wouldn't you take them there?
Well, I think in this specific example,
I'm talking about any example.
Okay, but in this specific example, I'm gonna just answer for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Brian even would answer in this case, but I would say that what I witnessed from Woody was, to me, to my untrained eyes, a recovery. Mm-hmm. You look recovered. You look fine. We're gonna keep an eye on you. Let's go eat dinner. I'm gonna be with you 100% of the time. We're gonna do an observation. That to me sounded what makes sense at the time, because you seemed recovered. That's why I didn't take him. Mm-hmm. So
that makes sense.
And honestly, they really never left my side. Mm-hmm. And I remember also when we got back to Brian's dive shop / house. So Brian was concerned. I want to add some perspective. I remember this, and I think it's really important. This is awesome. there was some concern. And I believe Brian had some conversation with you in the background that he didn't want me to hear. That was something to the effect of, by the way, he's not diving tomorrow.
He's not diving tomorrow.
Right? So he was concerned enough to know that. But then I got out of the van and immediately I really got tired again, and I went and laid down on Brian's couch. And I just said, guys, this all I want to do is chill and rest. I'm just relaxing right now. Just let me lay here or whatever. And even that seemed rather normal.
Yeah.
And then, we went. They made the dinner. I got up. I get to the table to eat the dinner. Not long into it. I'm trying to remember. Am I really not long? Like, gosh, 5 minutes into it. I have a few bites, and all of a sudden, I'm feeling really nauseous. That was the first feeling, just nausea. And then I'm feeling that wave again of just exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
So I get up. I don't talk to them. I literally am just in a zone of something's not right. I get up. They don't know what's going on. I walk. My brain was good enough to walk back to where I had left the oxygen 30 feet, 40 feet from this table we were eating at. And I get to that spot where the oxygen is. And at that point, I am no longer remembering exactly what happened.
Yeah, you fainted. But
was I completely fainted?
But the thing is that when we say like this in story, it seems like everything was super fast. But these are big chunks of time. Like from the time you seemed recovered up until the symptoms came back and you fainted, it was hours. It was like 1 or 2 hours or whatever.
When you say fainted, when you came up to me,
yeah, you were out on the chair. You were gone. Yeah. I mean, we talked about this on the video. This is not news. But once the symptoms came back, again, you went from looking fully recovered, eating your leather, which is what you eat, that steak.
I will chat it now.
From that, you went to fainted, and we went to the hospital. Yeah. There was no longer a debate. Are you okay?
That was go time.
Yeah.
And how far is the house to the hospital?
5 minutes.
That was really close.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the question then is, again, that local rationality piece. How did it make sense not to go to the hospital on the way to Brian's then?
Because he was recovered in our eyes. Now, again, knowing what we know now, we know he wasn't. Mm-hmm. But in the van, he seemed recovered. Back to normal.
I would tell you that I think it's okay for all of us to have learned a lesson here. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing that I want to say. And that's how we are on Dive Talk. It's not bad that we've now learned a lesson, which is no matter what, I'm of the opinion now that if a diver is acting after coming out of a deco dive for over 2 hours, where they did
it doesn't even have to be a deco dive.
Whatever, but they're acting. These are different. Now, yeah, we've got to take that person no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
And it's okay to learn a lesson, but it's not like Brian and Gus. Their care for me was non-stop.
No. And when I say, how did it make sense, I'm trying to explain that local rationality. You made sense at that time.
Right.
And that's the bit then.
Yeah. And
exactly.
And again, I think that a lot of good things came out of that. I think from the way things came out and the way Dan is handling the feedback that we provided, because this is a real life emergency that we had. I think that things will be better for other people diving there, and there was a lot of criticism about like, what do you expect? And I think Gareth, you mentioned as well, like having an insurance card doesn't mean that you're gonna, teleport.
You can't teleport from
this
the
is
side.
a good point.
That is important.
This is really important. I want you to talk about this.
Right, but there was some criticism about like, well, what do you expect for Dan to have something line up in the Bahamas? Yes. Like, I get it if you're in the Marshall Islands on the place where they try the nuclear bombs. Out of there, they probably don't have a plane waiting for you to take you back to a chamber. But in the Bahamas? Come on.
Well, so there's the assumptions that we have as to what the cover is available.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a trust that's involved, and people take insurance, and they believe that there is cover in place, and they believe that you're just going to jump into a chamber or it's going to be available to you. And I talked beforehand of a case about 3 years or so ago in the Galapagos Islands of a recreational diver getting quite badly bent. And then there was a speedboat ride to get them, and it was a long time to get from the dive site to the chamber and then get the treatment. And there's a lot of people just sit there and go, well, I've got dive insurance, I've got a card, that'll save me. And it's like, no, you're still going to get transited to the chamber, and all that time it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
So, and it's this recognition of knowing people in the cave diving community of how many chambers are active in Florida for divers and accessible.
Yeah.
And the numbers are probably on how many you can count on one hand, and how many divers are out there going, yeah, it's great. If I get bent, I've got, insurance, I can get into a chamber, I get treated. It's not as simple as that. It's, there's a whole marketing issue here.
Okay. This is what I want to say about it. This is really awesome. You know that form that you sign that talks about diver responsibility? You see, you really do have responsibility as a diver. And this is a lesson that I learned. I mean, I definitely believed that when I was holding this Dan card, I'm covered everywhere in the world, and there's not going to be a problem if I need to be call up Dan.
Airlifted, whatever.
Like I figured it was this easy process. And Dan has been amazing. I got to tell you guys, I'm a Dan fan. I just want you all to hear this now because of their willingness to say, let's look at what happened. And we're not automatically going to say, by the way, Dan did everything wrong. You guys have some responsibility here. Like if I would have gone directly there, I wouldn't have had to wait till the nighttime where it was harder to get transported. These are fair comments, but there was a perception based upon marketing materials, etc., that no matter what, we've got you. And Dan is willing, and they are making a change, from what I understand, to actually bring that whole transportation part that they were outsourcing, that they themselves were relying upon somebody else, now seeing, and I'm not the only one, where that's not as reliable as you thought. But because of that, and even though they're making these changes, it's no joke when you are in any foreign country, and frankly, even in the U.S., to have a definite plan when you are going diving and something happens. You cannot assume that Dan is going to be there to totally take care of you. Your plan better help those with you take care of you. You gotta be somewhat self-sufficient. This is no joke. I'm not saying I thought it was a joke before. Okay, I'm a dive professional, and I preached having a plan. But I'm here to tell you that it's easy to not really do that planning that we all want to teach in a class, in a theoretical class, right? Where we have this perfect scenario in a rescue class, and where's your dive plan? And now you're going to act on this plan. That's easy. Let me tell you, real world, whatever you think you practiced or learned in a class, it's so variable that you better be prepared for the unexpected. And that's what I'm trying to convey, that I've learned more as a diver that has gone through this.
Absolutely. And so, we don't manage risk in diving, we manage uncertainties. And the difference is that risks are managed by numbers, and we can count risk versus reward. What are we going to invest, and what are we going to get back out of it? Uncertainties are managed by heuristics, biases, mental shortcuts. If we don't hear about stories, those stories don't exist. We don't hear about bad stories. Fortunately, they don't happen very often, but they happen a lot more often than we hear about them. And as a consequence, we think that diving is a safe, accessible sport for everybody. We are in an inherently hazardous environment. You don't have gills, it goes wrong, it can end up very badly. So you've got to look at how do we reduce the margin for things going wrong. So things like rescue training. When was the last time you did a surface tow? Getting back on a boat. When was the last time you looked at, say, your Nautilus Lifeline? When was the last time you put an SMB up on your own while you were task loading, doing, say, an air share in a current? I had a story which I'm putting together of a trip that was out on a liverboard. They had a cardiac arrest on one of their divers. They went to get the AED, which the dive organizer had checked the oxygen. They checked the AED was there. The AED didn't work. And the reason the AED didn't work is because the battery was wrapped in plastic to prevent corrosion in salt water, in a salt environment. So you sit there and go, okay, and so all the time we are making assumptions, and assumptions make the world go round at the pace it does. We can't validate everything, but what we have to do is validate the critical assumptions. What are those things that are going to stop you getting in the deep mire and the stuff that's going to pull you out of it? Validate those and check those assumptions. Because it's really easy afterwards to go, I should have done that. And we start using these counterfactuals, should have, could have, would have, which is really easy to identify the dots and join them up afterwards. In the real time, you don't even know what a dot is, to let alone be able to join it and tell the story going forward. So, and look for those bits. And people go, oh, God, just tinfoil hat. You're just looking conspiracies. Stuff goes wrong. Can't you just have some fun, Gareth? And it's like, no, actually, because I know what the outcomes can be, because I hear the stories. And so they're at a much higher level in my mind. And I think they probably happen way more than they do. And so I'm on one end, and a lot of the diving population is, hey, we don't hear about these stories. Because there's a lot of stigma about making mistakes, about getting bent, and all sorts of things. And actually, it's be able to create the environment where we can tell that story. And when I was saying about how does it make sense, look at people's rationality. And that's why I picked up on the stupid thing earlier, is it's easy to call people stupid. They're not. They make total sense about what they're doing at that time. And that's really about that local rationality piece.
That's smart.
Can you tell more about... we didn't say this because our viewers are listening to you. Obviously, he's 1,000 times more intelligent than us. That's... pretty
at least
obvious.
Yeah.
Why do you hear about these stories? What do you do?
So people trust me.
What do you write? What's your book?
So absolutely. So I will get stories through, and I've just finished a master's degree looking at the barriers to telling stories in the diving industry. Why is it that the industry can't tell stories? And there's a whole bunch of factors, and it's about to be uploaded to the university, and I'm going to write a series of blogs because it's 20,000 words and people are not going to read that. So I'm going to pull out the key themes, and fear is a huge one. Fear of looking stupid, fear of being judged by others, fear of getting litigated. Organizations are fearful of losing market share. If they put standards in place, well, that means that instructors won't come to us. And so they'll go to somebody else and we'll lose market share. So the piece about, people will come to me and say, I've got this great story, Gareth. Here we go. This is what's happened. And we have a dialogue, and it takes a number of iterations. So your piece about, your story, you're triggered my story, and stories trigger stories.
Yeah.
And so you'll hear something, and then you'll have a dialogue back and forth, and you start to collect this stuff. And people know that I'm not judging. I'm going to provide a very neutral view about what's happening, about how it makes sense. Because people are trying to do the best they can. There are very few reckless people that are out there. But afterwards we can look on and go, oh my God, how stupid were they? Could they not see those cues and clues? And it's like, no, it's not. So, that's really what and part of the problem is that people don't want to tell the stories. And my view is fatalities are a terrible way of learning, because you can't ask the most important person, because normally they're dead. And then people go, but we don't want to say things because we don't want to judge ill of the bad, of the dead. And you sit there going, actually, if we separate the actions from the individual, let's see how it made sense for them to do that, and then we can really learn. So, that's the key piece. And the blogs are put together, and the training, the programs that are there, the books there. It's all about explaining things in a rational, scientific basis to say, this is why people behave the way they do. They're not stupid. There's masses of evidence in aviation and healthcare and oil and gas that says this is why people do what they do. They're not being stupid.
Yeah, and I was at I think I've talked about this before. I was at a cave diving conference, and this topic came up, and one of the people on the table or whatever, the speakers, let's just say, I'm not gonna name any names, but he said that when you have an incident, the last thing you want to do is make it public. That you should talk to your team, like with the divers that were with you in the water, talk about what happened, learn from it, and basically don't share it with others, because then it makes people feel like cave diving is scary and dangerous, and it's more dangerous. Like, people know it's dangerous, but like that all these things could happen and go wrong. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, I cannot, like, I feel the complete opposite, right? I think your documentary, If Only, which we reacted to in this channel,
Yeah.
did a really great job taking the tragedy from Brian Buggy and how he died on his rebreather training, learning from that. Like, and it's hard to quantify. How can you quantify how many people were saved? How many more people are paying attention to their PO2 on the rebreather because they watched that documentary, right? How much can we learn from these incidents that some people in the industry, especially the cave diving community that always wants to look like they are the best divers in the world, we never make mistakes, we're so perfect, how can that prevent us from learning from other people's mistakes?
I totally agree, and I'm gonna say, so how do you rationalize the storytelling that you do with the videos you have, so the divers react to when you don't have the full context, and that's to me it's a really important bit, and a frustration I have with the perception I have of the videos is, and Gus and I have talked about it, it's the entertainment versus the education.
That's the answer.
And the thing then is, the entertainment may shut the education down.
But I think the entertainment has done two things. Okay? And I love this. Number one, it's definitely educated. I don't have to assume it. I don't have to wonder it. We hear it. Instructors are getting people to enroll in more classes. People are way more into diving now. So it's driving people to be more educated. They understand better that, wow, I'm not going to venture into a cave. There are rules and serious skills that are necessary. I was seriously entertained, but I'm also constantly hearing a theme of safety, education. And the second thing that I love about this whole crazy phenomenon of dive talk, it's creating a positive growth, and more people are starting to be more welcoming and dropping their ego and pride. That Gus just talked about. It's happening. Some people, without mentioning names, that were the most elite are more welcoming. Diving was never like this, ever, decades ago. It was just everybody's welcome. Everybody is included. Everybody should have a right to learn. So it doesn't matter if our reactions are factually correct. That does not matter. They're just a reaction. That's why we say it's a reaction. I'm feeling this right now when I watch this video. I'm not telling you this is right. I'm not telling you this is facts, but in my conveyance of those feelings, I can educate you because you're having fun. And if you're having fun, you can learn. If you're not having fun, you just can't learn, and you don't want to learn. You don't want to become part of diving. That's the secret sauce of dive talk.
Well, and I think a lot of people are like, when I watch a movie that is based on a true story, after the movie I go back and research, Wikipedia, anything. Like, I want to learn about this guy or whatever, what's different than the movie. And I think that a lot of people that watch our videos will then go and learn from Gareth. We'll go and learn from others who are experts. And now I want to learn more about this human factors in diving. Now I need to really get more information. Well, we're not going to share that message. That's your message, right? So that's for you to share. And I think that being able to use this platform to showcase the talent that is out there and the level of experts that are out there, I think that has a mission, right? That is our mission in a lot of ways. And yeah, it is true. Sometimes we do reactions that are like, I don't know what this boat is. I don't know where they are. Where are they? It looks like Hawaii. I don't know. Like, could it be better if we actually knew what we were watching? Yeah, in some videos. but then we don't react to Baywatch diving, right? Which
No.
people which people laugh about.
And
So-
also, you know, we get a criticism. You're only doing that to attract viewers.
Yes.
Absolutely.
that's true.
And yes,
Right.
we are doing this to get more viewers. We
Yeah.
put thumbnails on there so you will watch our videos. Absolutely.
Well,
And
it's the
guess
same
what?
criticism with Dan. It's like, well, Dan is only making these changes because he happened to you guys. And
Great. I
that's
mean,
still
yes,
good. I'm glad they did it.
They're
No matter
good.
what. Yeah.
It's okay to have good things come out of whatever our intentions are.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's better than if this had not happened in terms of dive talk, in terms of an incident.
And actually, it's a really important piece to bring out. And one of the things that I say is success is a terrible teacher when you get it right first time. There are so many, and in fact, you know, I've just finished 4 days worth of training. The first day, the end of the first day, they had a really successful mission. The beginning of the second day, they didn't. There were a lot of issues in that mission, and they learned more in the mission that went wrong because they were able to reflect on it. And I think that's the critical piece of where you said react, and I would say actually react is the emotion we want to in the diving space. We don't want people to react. We want people to respond. And respond is based on a little bit of thinking and slowing down. There are very few things in diving where you have to do something right now. And that would be a hypoxic situation,
Right.
a descent where you've got no control over your buoyancy. Out of gas, well, you can hold your breath for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, go to somebody else. You know, there are very few things where you have to do something right now. So I actually think one of the things is getting people to slow down and think about that local rationality.
Yeah.
And one of the training programs, or a number of the videos we use, there's at least 3 in the 2-day program we use, where we use short little snippets of videos. We only use 10-second clips, and we ask people to say, what do you think's happened? And they will naturally jump to conclusions because they don't have the context. And they say, well, it could have been this, could have been that. They were stupid. They should have done. And it's like you sit there and go, you don't have all the story. And I think that's the big thing that we miss in the diving space is we do not understand the story. And we want to get multiple actor stories. And it doesn't matter they're different stories. And actually, if they're identical, they're collusion. You know, that's one of the things that comes out of the law enforcement piece. You get a half a dozen people and they tell exactly the same story. They've been talking. Because you want to have differences, because that's what the normal thing is. So getting those different stories out there, and that requires us to change to say, okay, let's reflect on how did it go, you know, what went well, why, what do we need to improve on, and how.
Yeah.
And the why did it go well, so we can replicate it, and how do we improve it, because the learning happens. Observations do not give us learning. Reflection is how we learn.
Nice. And you did mention, Gareth, that you've been running a training course for 4 days now. You know, for those of you watching, wanted to take some training from Gareth, you do it in person, but there's also the online version of the training. Of course, it's not as extensive as the multi-day course, right? The in-person workshop, which I've heard nothing but great reviews, by the way. But can you talk a little bit about your training? And we'll drop links on the description
Yeah,
as well.
sure. So there's a number of different levels. There's a whole bunch of blogs out there. So for people who don't want to spend any money but just want to read stuff, there's 250 plus blogs that we've got on the website. There's a book, the Under Pressure book, and then actually in the training itself, there's a self-paced online program which is 3.5-4 hours long, which is is available there. There's a 10-week program which is 15 hours worth of effort over a 10-week period, and then there's the face-to-face program which is 2 days. Highly intensive, highly experiential, very emotional. Somebody said in a recent class, prepare to be utterly destroyed, but rebuilt at the same time and utterly supported. And it's just this piece of having a mirror held up to you. And I don't tell you, and the instructors don't tell you the answers. We just ask you uncomfortable questions.
Nice.
And so the students discover it themselves. And so I've had 2 classes done, and I've got another 2-day class running with a DSO here at Georgia Aquarium.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us and for talking to us. You are, I think, the global authority when it comes to dive safety and preparing for situations at all levels. There's obviously experts that are dive safety, commercial divers and whatnot. They have all this technical expertise, but I think the concepts that you teach are extrapolate to beginner divers, cave divers, instructors, anybody. So we're really lucky to have you. So thank you, Gareth, for stopping by the studio. And for those of you who missed the reaction to the If Only documentary, go ahead.
What
were you gonna say?
One more thing. First of all, I love this conversation.
Yes.
I really do, because I think it's honest.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that if we're willing to be honest, drop the ego, drop all of that, just honest as divers and truly just care, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, we want to take care of each other. That's the main thing. The second thing that I want to say is that this is not the part 2 of the Dan story. Okay.
Or if it is, there's part 3.
Well,
coming.
then fine. There's a part 3 because we are going to meet with Dan. I spoke with the CEO via email today, and he is working on getting those third-party transportation company transcripts.
Yeah.
Those are the critical ones. How did we not get Dan to be able to initiate the transportation? That's coming. And then we get to sit down with them and talk about all the great changes that Dan actually, I think, already made and is still making. So stay tuned for that. But
And
thank
can
you.
I add something on that?
Sure. Yeah.
So actually, again, the local rationality of that. So understanding the commercial activities that happen. And divers are normally pretty tight. They want cheap deals. Services that are held inside an organization cost that organization money, and then that costs their clients money. And so you're now in a situation that we want stuff all really cheap and accessible, but we don't want to pay for it. And so actually that's a question to ask then is, actually, what's the commercial side? And often divers do not think about that. They want the best services on the liverboards, they want the best staff and everything else like that, but they won't pay for it.
Right. Yeah, and that's a bonus.
True.
Bonus question or comment that happened a lot is, the U.S. system is broken, or if this happened to me, it would be free. Well, both wrong, because it happened in the Bahamas. So it had nothing to do with the U.S.
know,
system.
somebody said
And I don't care if you have the best health care for free in your country. If you were in the Bahamas, you would have had to pay to get treated. So it would have happened regardless. So anyway, like I mentioned, we reacted to If Only before. Gareth, amazing documentary. It was a subset of the documentary. So I recommend that you go watch the whole thing. We didn't react to the whole thing. And I'm going to leave a link right here so you can check it out. Thank you again, Gareth, for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
And
Thank you.
enjoy the documentary.
Bye, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Texas toast.